welcome everybody to this month's episode of Why Witt. It's going to be a great theater-centric episode, but also you'll be able to apply this to any parts of your life. So you'll probably see a different setup here. You'll see Tim was not cloned. Timmy he forgot that his kids had spring break this week, and I got the phone call, and that's just how Timmy rolls. So we have Darin from the theater department, which he will introduce himself in a little bit. And we appreciate everybody for coming out, getting that extra credit. Nothing wrong with that. So we'll start here. So have you been wondering what your purpose is? Have you found success? Are you wondering what drives you and gives your life meaning? So are we. We are delving into the journeys of fellow successful alumni. Wittenberg is a place, and while the names may change, the stories and personalities do not. What are Darin and I doing here? We recognize that each one of us are on a journey to try to find our best selves, a journey towards our purpose in life, a journey towards success, to thriving, to whatever that means to us. Being on the other side of our Wittenberg student experience, we now know that there is no one right path. The mission of our time together, each show, is to help you, our audience, know that there are many different paths to purpose, to experience, to success. Your path to Wittenberg was different. Your path after Wittenberg is too. On our journey together, we're passing the light from our stories and experiences of our fellow alumni that our fellow alumni are sharing with us on their way to success. Now our guest tonight, Chris Conti. He is a 1998 theater major. He's a Chief Innovation Officer at PRG, that's the Production Resource Group, Emmy Award Winner for the FollowSpot System. We'll find out about that. And Tom, I'm not going to butcher it.
Wirtshafter.
Executive Director and founder of the Barrow Street Theater, President Emeritas of Town Hall in New York City. Tom and Chris came to Wittenberg to join the theater. They had no idea what that would mean for their lives, but they had lots of hope of what that would mean. In Massachusetts, Chris, in three seemingly conflicting things, lacrosse, geography, and theater, but it wasn't until theater that an auspicious event landed him in doing lighting, detention. What was supposed to be high school drudgery as he was hanging lights backstage at a high school theater production was a place where he found joy and comfort. Around his junior year, when he was trying to decide where to go to college, his high school counselor showed Chris the list of Midwest schools, and Wittenberg wound up checking all the boxes. While at Witt, Chris declared theater early and had an internship with Barrow in his junior year. They offered him a job immediately. In his senior year, Chris had a job waiting for him upon graduation. He moved to New York City and has never looked back. After putting on concerts and working his way to crew chief for Justin Timberlake and Michael Jackson, Chris wanted to be on tour with a band as a tech. There was a small British band that didn't know anyone, and Chris took a chance on them. That band was called Coldplay. So by the mid-2000s, he finally threw in the town into touring and switched to product development. So he threw in the towel, and he is now the Chief Innovation Officer at PRG, a research group for production of shows and stage events. Tom had one skill, and he told me this: typing. That's old school. He's from Shaker Heights, Cleveland. His love of history led him to Wittenberg through his favorite teacher, Jerry Grant. He found his family and home after a girl, imagine that, asked him to rehearse lines for theater. The skill of typing led him to New York City and job in marketing that helped him pay the bills. After a couple years on stage, he realized he was an actor. As he contemplated his next evolution in musicals, which are the majority of the long-run hits on Broadway, he discovered that he was not a triple threat, which means the ability to sing, act, and dance. With some help, he adjusted. He's got his MBA from NYU that led him into the insurance business, a far cry from theater, but not quite. He was able to use his acting chops, was able to build an annuity business in insurance industry, which he sold to MetLife after the exit, and he was trying to figure out what to do next. He was trying to remember where his passions lay. He found his way back into the theater. A guy, Chip Morellis, was writing a play, and Tom volunteered to produce it. He lost money, but after the second play, he broke even, and he realized the only way to make money was to own or control the venue, which led to ticket sales. Hence the creation of Barrow Street Theater, eventually Tom Hall, both really well thought of New York City theaters off Broadway. As Tom will openly admit, there is nothing like the opening night, the buzz before the lights go up, the stage set, the anticipation makes everyone feel alive. No wonder theater is such an attractive space. But how do you have that conversation with your parents that you want to be a theater major? Once you go to the other side of that, are you on stage or are you behind the curtain? Once you decide that this is the life for you, do you decide to work on lights or sound, or do you get over the whole production or into the whole production thing? Do you open a studio, theater, musical, plays, movies, or one-person shows? How do you make enough money to stay alive in theater? How do you live in New York, one of the most expensive cities in the world, making actor or production wages with varying work cycles? How do you create a life on the road, touring with bands or actors? Once they left Wittenberg, it wasn't a straight and narrow path to their current success. What Tom and Chris learned on campus, the stick-to-itiveness, flexibility, and problem solving they use every day in theater and in production. From here out, Darin and I will examine what it means to be in theater for a living, and we'll find out together the deeper answers on why Witt, what happened while Chris and Tom were here, how they navigated their way to success. So our time together is all about the questions later that you have. So after Darin and I are done with our general discussion, we're going to open up the questions to the audience. So now our guest, and I hate that Tim's an excellent writer. He did this on purpose, and now I feel his pain. So, all right, we'll start, and we'll have each of you, introduce yourselves again.
How can I introduce myself better than you just did?
Yeah, you already
Thank
killed
you,
it.
Hud. Yeah, you did great. Thank you. Yes, my name's Tom Wirtshafter, and I've lived in New York for almost 50 years. I'm delighted to be back at Wittenberg and with so many great memories. But I'm excited to talk to you guys about anybody wants to move to New York. I want to encourage you to do it, and we're going to talk about that tonight.
My name's Chris Conti. I can't even follow that up. That's an amazing introduction. I mean, you guys are, it's crazy.
Crazy.
I appreciate that. I'm Chief Innovation Officer at Production Resource Group, and it's fantastic to be back here at Witt and get a chance to talk a little bit about how I got to where I am from Wittenberg.
All right, we need Darin to introduce himself to those that don't know him, but to the wider audience out there on that interweb or whatever. Go ahead, Darin, take it away.
My name is Darin Keesing. I am the interim chair of the Department of Theater and Dance, and I teach all the courses in design, technology, and production here at the school. So not only do I teach, I also design most of the shows that we do here on campus, and mentor and teach our students who are taking that path as well.
How long have you been here?
I'm finishing up my 7th year here.
Wow.
Great. Great website, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay. So the one thing we always ask everybody is, I know we mentioned it in the intro, is walk us through that senior year of high school and what made you choose Wittenberg.
Well, I talked about a wonderful human being, our history, social studies professor, teacher at Shaker Heights named Jerry Graham, and he just was Mr. Rah-Rah Wittenberg, and every year a few people from Shaker Heights would come down to Wittenberg, and I was one of them, and I loved it. I also will admit that I was left-handed, and so I probably started at the back of the book on colleges and Xavier, and then I didn't quite make it to Wisconsin, and it ended up at Wittenberg, and delighted about that decision every day of my life.
Chris.
I ended up Wittenberg because I wanted something different. I was from Massachusetts, so I was on the East Coast, obviously, and I was looking at schools out in the Midwest where coming from the East Coast was a completely different experience coming to here. But Wittenberg checked all the boxes. Beautiful campus. At the time I played lacrosse, good history program, geography, and I was still interested in theater at the time. And again, a good program, and the food here actually was pretty good too, if I recall.
Is that the CDR?
Yeah,
yeah. CDR.
Gourmet Grill.
Yeah.
We used to have that.
So, question. So you were a lacrosse player in high school, and you looked at across here. Do you remember who you stayed with and who took you around did you visit?
I did visit. Ended up being a theater major that actually took me around. A guy by the name of Stephen Tollifield, who lives out in, I think, San Francisco now.
Okay.
It was just so funny that ending up as a theater major, he happened to be just the one that took me around and everything. But I met the coach when I was here and stuff, and that was a great experience. I only played for a short time here, but it was awesome for sure.
Yeah. Tom, did you?
I don't remember exactly, but I remember being at the ATO house where I got drunk and we watched some films and I was hooked.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore.
No, it's not a thing. So, Tom, did you play any sports in high school while you were here?
I was a runner. I wasn't good at sports, which is probably why I ended up in the theater. I was this kind of young, shy kid who didn't really know what to do. And as you mentioned, a young woman named Melissa Sloban, her name is now, she said, I'm looking for some kids to do a scene for my directing class. And it was Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and we spent the next couple of years just doing things, and it was just wonderful.
That's great. So, Darin, as you have these students coming through class, right? And they're looking at career path. Those are majors, and they could be minors. Are they coming to you with like questions, or how are you maybe guiding the students to possible, different job possibilities?
Yeah, so we do a couple different things. So number one, recognizing that Springfield, Ohio is not the theatrical mecca of the world, right? We do both. We try to bring students out of Springfield and go visit bigger cities to go see things. So fall break every year, we take 10 or 12 students and go on a trip to Chicago and see a couple shows. And see the city and try to do some networking there. And then the other thing we do is 2 out of every 3 shows we do here on campus, we bring guest directors from outside of campus. So we've had, over the past 5 years, we've had directors from New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Los Angeles. So we're really hooking our students up, getting them out to see professional theater and also bringing professional people in to work with our students. And then on top of that, we have a class that they take in their junior and senior year. It's a senior seminar class that the entire class is, how do you go and do this once you leave? And it's everything from headshots, resumes, what's a manager, what's an agent, how much does it cost to move somewhere, all the student loan consolidation and all private insurance, like all this kind of nuts and bolts of, oh, you want to move to Chicago? What does that mean? What does it cost? Where do you want to live? What are the good, like all that kind of stuff. So it's really like going down the list over 2 semesters of how to go do this from people who've done it, which is the important thing.
Yeah, we're going to bounce around, and I'm going to. Yeah, that's what. Let's go with the cost, because a lot of times people, as I said on our pre-interview, I moved to New York for. South Bronx for music, and that's a different story. But let's talk about like cost. Talk about when you first moved, where you lived at, and just how much it costs, and then bring it to the present day, and then you can talk about when you first got there, which is about 20-year gap, right? 25 or so years.
Yeah, I joined a friend of mine from Wittenberg, Harold Cooper, and the two of us moved to New York at the end of 1975. He went to the School of Visual Arts to finish up his art degree, which was an excellent decision. And Coop and his brother created a wonderful, wonderful graphic design marketing company. And I went to acting school. My father said, look, as long as you're going to school, I'll pay for it. And I said, how about acting school? And he gulped and he said, all right, give it a shot. And I'm always grateful about that. He gave me a few $1,000s, which was a lot of money back then. Our first rent was a 2-bedroom apartment in Chelsea, which is now a very hot area, but nobody wanted to live back then. And we split the rent of $275 a month.
Oh my
God. That sounds great.
Oh my God.
That sounds great until you realize that when I took my first job, I was making $115 a week. So it kind of, you got to keep everything in perspective. But there's always, it's always a good time to move to New York, even though there's periods of time where the rent is more expensive, so you have 3 roommates instead of 2 roommates. You have a smaller place without 3 bathrooms, you have 1 bathroom. I mean, you have to make these sacrifices just to get in there. There's plenty of jobs. Again, as long as you can type, you probably can get one, but it was a lot cheaper back then than it is now.
Yeah, or you do what I did, which was move to New Jersey, which is a little cheaper than New York City. I was very fortunate in that I got hired by my company at the end of my junior year. So I went through all through senior year with a job already, except the job was actually in Dallas, Texas. So I had no intention whatsoever of moving to New York City. So I had gone home, I was gonna take like a week off, and then I was gonna go to Dallas. And I was maybe home 2-3 days, and the phone rings. They're like, when can you be in New York City? I said, I can be there in 48 hours. So in the span of 48 hours, I packed up my stuff, found a place to live, and moved to New York City.
Did you drive from that?
Yeah.
Where were you, from here or Dallas?
I was back in Massachusetts at that point.
Sit down.
So I'd driven home from Wittenberg. I was home for 2 days. Thank you. And as soon as I got home, I was at home for 2 days, and then I moved to New York in 48 hours, and then never left.
What was your rent? Do you remember the first
Oh, I do, yeah. So
what year was that?
So it was 1998. Interesting enough, there was a fairly large contingent of people from Wittenberg, from the theater actually, had moved to Brooklyn and stuff. And my roommate also happened to be, my roommate that I had here was going to New York. So we ended up continuing our being roommates in New Jersey effectively. But rent was, it was a 2-bedroom apartment in Weehawken, New Jersey, overlooking Manhattan, and it was $1,400. So $700 each of us.
Okay, so when I went, it was 2006, 7, and I was in South Bronx, which is, he would say shady, but he said
Dicey.
3 blocks north of Yankee Stadium, D&B train. I split a 1-bedroom, which meant he had the bedroom, I had the living room, and I was paying $450. But what so the thing that is that people don't think that it's doable. It's doable. Like you said, the sacrifice, if you really want to do something in the arts or theater.
It was a lot of ramen noodles and mac and cheese and and I mean, anytime there was a chance for freelance work, like nights and weekends, absolutely.
Yeah. Darin, I'm not familiar with, I tried to do some digging, but can you give, probably your students don't even know, can you give a little bit about your journey?
So I went to high school in central Pennsylvania. I actually lived 4 blocks off of the Penn State campus, so 80% of my high school went to Penn State, which meant I wasn't interested in going to Penn State. Just kind of wanted to get out, and doing theater, even though they have a really good theater program there, I wanted to move somewhere where theater was really happening. I went to DePaul University for my undergrad.
L or W?
L.
L.
Yeah, in Chicago. Learned about it from a mailer. I guess those things work, Or you fill out, you do the PSAT and you say what you're interested in, then you get 1 million pieces of mail, right? And that one came up. I was like, oh, Chicago, that's cool. And my parents were fine with me moving 600 miles away to go to undergrad when I was 17 years old. So I did that for 4 years, graduated, thought about grad school, but I was like, I'll wait 3-4 years to do it. And I was doing some shows, and I was assisting a show at the Goodman Theater in Chicago. And 2 of the designers on the show were professors at Northwestern. And so I met them as an assistant designer, not as a student. And they're like, oh, have you thought about grad school? And you should think about applying. And I thought, well, I wasn't going to go to grad school, but if I have 2 people from Northwestern suggesting I apply, it's probably a good idea to apply even if I don't get in, right? So I applied, and I got in. I learned later that I was number 3 on their list, and they take 2 people a year. But one of the people they made an offer to went to San Diego State instead, and so I got bumped up. Found out about that like 2 years later. It doesn't matter how you get in.
Right? Once you're in, you're in.
Once you're in. And so I went to Northwestern for 3 years, graduated there, and then was working professionally in Chicago. And then I started moving around because, as a designer, you're doing gig work. My wife had a steady job, so I was following a steady job wherever my wife was going. Moved to Columbus in 2008 and was doing stuff there, and was always had an eye on teaching, but professor jobs in theater just don't open very often, because once people get in them, they kind of do it for 50 years, like Dr. George, or someone that you guys know who, Dr. George was our chair here for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
40 years.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And so when the Wittenberg job opened up, I applied for it because it was sort of within the sphere of where I already lived, and with my wife's job, and I got lucky enough to be here and started in 2017. So.
No, that's great, because one of the things is that people think, and we generalize that it's a straight line to success. So I'm glad you mentioned, how you had to navigate that. So Tom, one of the most interesting things that I did not know is that, can you tell everyone how you, and this is a lesson, how you kept your passion, which was theater, but you had to handle business in the meantime to get to where, not at where you are now, but to get back to theater.
I came to New York to be part of a theater, and I realized really quickly that I just didn't have the heart. And I tell people, if you want to be successful in the theater, do not have a backup plan, because you will take it at some point. And so I did have a backup plan. I could type, and I got into advertising, and then I did get my MBA, and then I went back and I helped a guy start a company that I stuck with for 25 years. But and I got my acting out because I learned to get up in front of a group of people through what I had learned here at Wittenberg, and was able to teach them how to sell mutual funds, and how to do retirement planning, and how to talk to their clients about making choices for their estates, and all these kind of things that I could get up and I could teach 30, 40, 50 people at the same time, because I was an actor. So I want
to hear this. Keep them up to you.
Yeah, we built a business. It was a really nice business, and we were able to sell it. And once I sold it, I knew that I was going to try to get back into theater. And then Chip Morellis, also a 1976 Wittenberg graduate, wrote a play, and I said, I'll help you. And he got me back into the business. And I told the story to you, Hud. We lost all of the money.
What year was this?
This was 1999, I think, 1999, something like that. 20-some years, 24 or 5 years ago. And I thought to myself, wait, now, if you don't do another show, that means you lost all your money. But if you do another show and try to learn from your mistakes, that would be a better use. And again, we didn't make money on the second show, but by that point, I did realize that if we can control the theater, we can control the economics of what we were doing. And for those weeks that were bad, we would take a hit, but the weeks were good, we would make money both as a show and as a theater, and that would give us enough firepower and control that we could decide how to run the theater, instead of going in and at 6 weeks you're out for the next show. So that really turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Having that business acumen, having some resources from the company that we sold, and having Chip and many other people help me along the way.
Gotcha. So, Chris, as you had the job from your junior year on, and I don't know what you did your senior year. It sounds like you could have took it a little easy, coasting. And you were originally in Texas, and then you go to New York City. Was this the dream job?
No, so I had, early on, I had decided that I wanted to do rock and roll touring. Like that was the goal. But Wittenberg gave me the core fundamentals to perform in this profession. But there's a lot of specialized equipment, which I just didn't, no one at that time got exposed to it at any university, anywhere. So I went to work for a company, Very Light, and I worked in the shop for 2 years, just learning how to fix and repair and service the company.
Can you tell people what the shop is? And you're in a room, and they're bringing what, mics, lights?
It's just, we were in a small building in Manhattan, and we're just doing.
Cutting your teeth.
Yeah, pulling cable. I started in the cable department, pulling cable, and then I graduated to different types of lighting fixtures and stuff like that. And then, you know, I'd like, if someone got sick, I would fill in for the day on a show. But I was solely focused on getting to touring, and I did 2 years in the shop. When I was done in the shop, a position opened up on our event staff, and then I started doing shows. So I'd be like the 5th or 6th guy on the crew. I'd be a climber, so I'm climbing up in the rafters, and slowly but surely I started working my way up the crew ladder. Eventually I became a crew chief. But the touring happened in 2000, where a small band had come to New York. They were in a small club, and you know, I said, yeah, I'm available, I'll go do the show. I had 12 lights, like there was nothing to it. We didn't even finish the show because the lead singer had strep throat. But the designer was British, and they're like, hey, we're coming back to do a tour. Do you want to come with us? I said, I would love to. I mean, that was it, right?
And that was Coldplay?
That was Coldplay.
So you met Chris Martin?
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys still on text?
No, fortunately not. I wish I could text him.
Okay.
But we used to, you know, it was when I was touring, it was pretty tight. We'd play basketball. The band would call us up with the crew. We'd play basketball and stuff together. Early on, it was, I mean, they were trying to cut their teeth just as much as we were on the crew. I mean, it was a tight.
And do you know what years was this? Because you get to New York in '99, right?
Yeah, so I started touring in 2000. The last tour I did with them, we finished in '06. So each tour, it was like I'd be on tour for 3 months, and then off for 6 or 7, and then back on tour again. And each tour kept on progressively getting bigger. You know, and it was interesting time with that particular band because they were on the upswing. Every sound check, they were rehearsing new material, and we oh man, the next album's going to be amazing. And then of course the album comes out and it is amazing, but it was none of the material that we had been listening to, which even blew my mind even more. And then, you know, with each tour, the production values kept on getting bigger. So like the first tour, we were doing festivals in small theaters and clubs, and it was, you know, a bus for the band, a bus for the crew, and one truck for all the gear. When we finished, I think we had like 8 or 9 buses. We were doing 20 semis here in the U.S., and we were doing like stadiums and arenas and stuff like that. So I mean, it was like progressing all the way up through that. It was pretty staggering.
That's wow. It's incredible. So Tom, one of the things that you mentioned was, let's get to you running and deciding to take over the theater space. Why, after you sold your very profitable business, would you decide to sink your hard-earned money into? Can you talk about the 2 theaters that you were involved in? Because you know, folks saw that and they were like, okay, so how did you, after you sold, get into those?
So, if you want to be creative, and I always did, I asked myself as a young kid, what would I like to be? Better looking, taller, more money, or more creative? And I always wanted to be more creative, and so I wanted to be part of that scene, that milieu. I wanted to be, if I wasn't going to be creative, I wanted to be around creative people, because there's an energy unlike anywhere else. And you know, I had grown a business, I had built a business, and I would build another business over the next last 20 years. But the creative juices and working with people, that it wasn't about the money, it was about trying to come up with a beautiful product that would make people move and think differently. That was really, really important. And so I hooked up with a gentleman I met along the way, Scott Morphy, and Scott was a real creative artistic director guy, and I was a real nuts and bolts business guy, and we ran that theater for 15 years, and we proved that commercial off-Broadway theater could not only thrive but make money and employ a lot of people, and we had a wonderful time. And what it was a community. It was a clubhouse. It was a place where everybody that worked there had a great time. We had such camaraderie. You know, if you're going to grow up and live in New York and you can create something like that, do it.
Can you explain for terms, because I didn't know this for a while. No, this is you. Off-Broadway versus on Broadway.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't know the difference.
Yeah, it's really by the size of the theater. Broadway, the smallest theater on Broadway is 500 seats and up. Off-Broadway is usually from about 100 to up to about 500. We had a 200-seat theater. And then off-Broadway is from 25 to 100 seats or more. And so it wasn't where you were geographically, but by the size of the theater.
Right. Yeah.
I was just saying, and there's an organization called the Broadway League, and there are very specific theater buildings that are designated as Broadway theaters, and others that aren't. That someone has decided somewhere along the way. So the show being not considered a Broadway show, it's, as I said, more based on what theater it's in.
That's right.
Than anything else.
So let's we're going to peel back a little bit, because we have Witt students here, and we're going to try to grab some attention here. So let's talk about your favorite places to maybe have a few Pepsi Colas. Maybe there were some houses that had some fiestas. And Tom, when you were here, what was the bar scene like? Were you into that then? How was the social scene? Can you let us know your favorite places to hang out?
Well, we could drink back then. I mean, there was a thing called 3-2 beer.
Near beer.
Near beer. And 18 you could drink in Ohio. Now I know you guys can't. So that could get us into the bars. And the bars downtown were the Hangar and the Ace. Those were our two favorite places. And there was also one here called the Peacock, I think.
The Bird?
The Bird. The Bird was here.
And
we would frequent these places, and on the way out the door, we would always buy a bottle of MD 2020. This was.
Can we explain what MD?
Well, it was.
You ever had MD?
No.
Chris, you have.
Yeah.
So can you quickly explain what MD?
Do I have to?
Mad Dog.
Mad Dog. But
Mad
here's
Dog.
what it really was.
Phenomenal.
For the Jewish people here, we have a celebration called Passover, and Mogen David makes a wine that is the worst tasting wine in the world. Now, it's only used for one night, right? So what do they do with the rest of it that they make? They put it in these bottles. They call it MD 2020, and you're drinking the worst wine in the whole world.
Are you serious?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh God.
Wait. So I know this has got to go out there. So I know Darin, Chris, listen, and I don't know if any of you students, I'm not encouraging drinking.
No.
But Mad Dog, MD 2020 was a rite of passage.
Yeah.
I know here at Wittenberg, grape was my favorite.
That was my favorite too.
Because it was the highest alcohol content.
No, because I couldn't taste it.
You can taste it. And a little Sprite. I guess they call that scissor these days. But I never knew that story.
MD is Mogen David.
Morgan and David.
Mogen
and David.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Mad Dog races.
Yeah, Mad Dog races. I don't know what's going on campus now, but this was like the heyday. But you really broke. I don't think anybody I've ever heard of that's wow. All right, so give me your favorite hangouts.
I like Station. It's the Savoy.
Savvy.
Yeah, you
No
can't
longer exists.
I know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Ringside was another place.
Great place.
Yeah.
No longer exists.
Used to hang out on West College quite a bit.
Yeah. Was there? So you came in as a lacrosse player. Did you still hang out with the Lax guys?
Yeah, occasionally, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd see them around.
Who was your core group of folks that you like to kind of kick it with?
There's a ton of theater people. Scott Tishkoff, Laura Barron, Christy Connectus. There's a couple people there. I hung out with a bunch, Amy Brown, a bunch of Snakes.
Yeah.
Which was pretty amazing.
Snake
Same here.
Yeah.
And then Phil Koch and Shu occasionally.
Shu, yeah.
So yeah.
Any particular people that you enjoyed hanging out with?
Well, my best friends for life are Lance Dietrich and Paul Epstein, who I met here at Wittenberg. Lance's aunt was Heimtraut Dietrich. The Dietrich house is named after her.
Oh, wow.
So Lance had quite a legacy here, and they're still my dearest friends. But I mean, yeah, we were at Myers, and Myers was a crazy place that now I think is.
It was a crazy place then?
Yeah.
It wasn't an honors dorm.
It was not an honors dorm. This is like,
Okay.
you had to walk up those 5 flights of stairs, but there was, we had the Pete Fleming, the filthy peeper we called him, and Jerry Miller, who had to leave school because he got himself, there was a crew. We had a great crew, but we've all remained friends all these years, so it's great.
I forgot to mention like my roommates, like John Castle and Mike Dunkley was another guy.
I just was
Right.
texting with Dunkley. I didn't know you. There it is.
Well, he was a fellow guy from Massachusetts, and we both.
So Dunkley, I was just texting with him probably a couple months ago. Great guitar player.
Indeed,
Shout
yeah.
out to Dunkley. All right, so Darin, I know you got some students here. Can we get into the Paul stories? Because you were with the L, so you're in Chicago.
Yeah, and DePaul, it's not in downtown Chicago. It's in a neighborhood that's called Lincoln Park, which now is it's sort of like the Brooklyn Heights of Chicago. It's
Right.
$2 million brownstones and everything. When I was there, it was not quite that yet, but it's an urban campus. And as such, you didn't have, in terms of nightlife and things like that, there was no like campus bars because you were just in Chicago. But I think the bar owners understood that there was a large 18 to 20-year-old population in the neighborhood, so maybe they weren't checking IDs as much and things like that in those bars. And when you're 18, you don't care if they get in trouble for that, right?
And I'm assuming you participated, maybe
a little bit.
Maybe there's no video history. So now we'll switch back over. So one of the things that people that I run into, and I know you run into on a pretty much daily basis, is how do we get to where these folks are? What are some of the exact steps? Because people are like, hey, I want to move to New York City. I would love to do what both of you do, but it's intimidating, even from a standpoint of most people don't even know New York has boroughs. They don't even know what that means. The price is intimidating. Their parents or guardians are very worried. So what would you, all three of you, say, step one, I want to work in, whether it's lighting, stage, camera, writing, producing, what would you say are the first steps that folks should make or think about making to make the move to New York City?
I got my 4 things.
You got your fourth?
I'll let you guys go.
Well, I got to say, from a being at school perspective, I think every single student that you work with is potentially someone you might work with outside of school.
100%.
So treating people really well, making friends, making connections here. One thing that I think is fortunate that's happening for us as a department recently is that we've started having some people graduate and move to Chicago, and that means the next year, if someone wants to move to Chicago, there's someone from last year who's there, and then each year that happens, there's sort of a network of at least, hey, it's a potential roommate or someone who can show me around or introduce me to people. So what you don't want to do is have bad blood or not work well with the people that are here, because every person you work with is a potential job, and with theater being such gig work and everything is sort of job to job, you just never know who's going to remember you or say, as you say, just call you out of the blue, go, hey, you're moving to Chicago, we really need someone for X, and then that's the thing that you get. And then I'd say on top of that is that once you decide to move somewhere and go, is just try to say yes to every single opportunity that comes along. Because again, it may be like, we can pay you nothing to come do this thing, but you don't know who you're about to meet, who you're going to work with, who 6 months later might actually have a really good paying job or introduce you to someone or something like that. So we talk about networking. It's not a theater, right? Business, everything that you study here at Wittenberg is networking, but it's so important to treat everybody you work with really well, so that they remember you and you're the first person they think of when they need something that they love.
Well, for me, it's 4 things. The first thing, and I've said this before, if you're on time, you're late. So if you're early, you're on time. And being early to your job or to whatever you're doing will make a world of difference for sure. If you're there before the boss gets in, it's noticed. And oftentimes, if you're the first one there and something pops up, they're going to grab you because you're already there and ready to go. The second thing is attitude. Hey, starting out, you're gonna have frankly, some shit jobs.
Yep.
And if you approach it with a positive attitude, like, yep, you know what, as the commercial says, just do it. I'm gonna get in there, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna have a great attitude, and I'm smile on my face, I'm not gonna complain. That gets noticed too. And then the third thing is work ethic. No matter how bad the job is, you do the best job you can. And you do it with a smile on your face, and you show up, say, hey, I'm here to do more. Like, what else can I do? And then the last thing I think is really important is asking questions. Because you're still learning, and I'm still learning today. And asking questions, hey, I want to learn more about what we're doing, and why did you do this, or what's going on? It shows that you're interested. It shows that you want to grow. It shows that you're invested. You want to be here. And I think regardless of what profession you're in, I think those 4 things really make a difference for employers, and it's what employers look at.
I think there's a stick-to-itness that is absolutely necessary in a big city. I moved to New York. I knew about 7 or 8 people that had moved from Cleveland or from Wittenberg, and within about 8 months they were all gone, and I was left by myself. And I had made a commitment to stay there for 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, I made another commitment to myself for 3 years. At the end of 5 years, I made a 5-year commitment. By that point, I had the stick-to-itness. But I can assure you that it was not easy. And I often remember going back to New York, and you know how a cat kind of when they get scared, the hair kind of goes on the back of their neck. It's the same thing happened to me every time. I'd come across the bridge and I would be getting my hackles up, so to speak. So I think there's a stick-to-itness that you have to have. And the second thing, and it's along the lines of what you're talking about, but it's make a commitment to yourself to create a business for yourself. You're a business, whether you're an actor or an actress, whether you're working for yourself or working for somebody else, you're a business. And you have to make yourself an asset to that by doing the things that Chris did. And you have to, if you're gonna wait for somebody to call you, you will not make it. You have to have the gumption. Well, and if you're too shy to get on the phone, then you write a letter, write a hand letter. A handwritten letter still works miracles. It really does. But all these kind of things, you have to turn yourself into a working business so that you become worth more every day, not only to yourself, but whoever you're working with.
Yeah, I mean, this is show business, not show friends.
Absolutely. And 3 is that what you said, Darin, it's about connections. It's, it's like when I first got into the financial world, I knew nothing. But I quickly realized that there were a lot of people out there that knew a lot more than I did. So if somebody asked me a question, I would say, I don't know, but I will get back to you. And that's really important, that whatever you say you're going to do it. But just as important is that I could call up a guy that was in the pension business. Hey, I just got this question. I don't know the answer. And he would give me the answer. And I would get a network of people out there. So just as you're saying, the connections, those networks become an important part of your life for the rest of your life.
And I'd say on top of that is I think, and this is something that young students have issues with sometimes, that they feel like those connections are something that potentially are like they're bothering somebody by asking a question or something like that. We ask our students in their senior year to go do their job shadowing, and you always have them go, well, I don't know anybody, whatever. And we go, I lived in Chicago for 13 years. Hey, your other professor did a show on Broadway. Like, we know people. Why don't you come to ask? Oh, I don't want. It's like we are resources for you as professors, as mentors, whatever. Like, what do you want to do? I'll call 5 people for you. I'll do the thing, right? And so taking advantage of them and not feeling like you're putting people out. Like rarely have I had a student actually go to a professional and say, I'd like to come, watch you do your thing, and had them say no. Like, people are very, very generous with their time. They are excited about talking about themselves, all those types of things. In terms of work ethic and attitude, I just had one of my classes, we had Zoom with a friend of mine who's an actor in Chicago, and he made a great point, which is, as an actor, sometimes you find yourself in a show where you're like, the show's not very good. maybe I don't like my co-star, maybe they're treating me bad, but every single night when you go to work, there's a theater full of people who've decided to spend money to come see you, so you cannot let them see all that. Like, you need to give them the best version of you and the best version of whatever this is every night, because it's not fair to someone to come sort of, they don't want to see your problems and your bad attitude and your drama on stage. Like, they want to see the show you're doing, and they don't need to know that you don't get along with people or whatever, right? And frankly, the bad shows are the ones that you end up with the best stories.
100%.
And the best, there's people I work with, remember 5 years ago we did that terrible show and then all the stories come out, right? You got to make it turn into a positive.
But a bad attitude will follow you forever.
100%.
You will, the casting directors won't put you up. The directors won't. I mean, you got to have a good attitude. You're so right about that.
And that's not theater centric.
No, that's anything.
That's actually
That's
everywhere. So being, and Timmy and I say this because we both primarily have been in the hospitality business. It is, any of these niche industries, it is a small world. So we learn about the bad apples, the folks to stay away from, whether it's suppliers, employees. It's always not to burn bridges is the message. So the one thing, and so you have to make a point, make a commitment, whether that's 24 months or whatever you do when you're trying to move somewhere, specifically New York City, bring a great attitude, because your first job is not going to be the instant gratification that social media. So we'll bump up to where social media is at, that makes, and we make this point here at Witt, that's not reality at all. So everybody we have on here who are very successful, like you two, they make it clear they have to, take the not so great in the grunt jobs. That's why I said when you were like, back in that room, soldering and all that kind of stuff. That's not glamorous, but it's crucial. So when you rise up to certain positions where there's teaching, because you've been there, and you've been there from a business perspective where you had to go out and build teams. It is all about your best employees are all folks that had a great attitude. They might not have been the most talented, and we, as a whole, talent is the whole thing. Hard work over talent is gonna win every single time. I think we could all say, and other people say, we know people that are naturally more talented, but they didn't want to put in the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're we're good. So we're gonna turn this over. So
Wait, can I say something real quick?
You go ahead, man.
One of the reasons I wanted to come back here for this specifically is I would not be here today professionally had I not come to Wittenberg. I'm 110% convinced of that. The skills that I learned here, the connections I made with the people, all of it made me who I am, and any success I have, I attribute directly to Wittenberg. I could not have been better prepared coming out of here for going in, at least into this particular profession. I told some students earlier today about that as well. The things that I learned here apply. These are small. We're in a small theater and it's a small campus. All the fundamentals that I learned here, I use on events like the Super Bowl. So it all translates directly, and I'm thankful and fortunate that I went here. So.
Can you speak on that, like what you learned at Witt, like with that translated? You going to NYC.
What happened to me at Witt is I came here thinking I knew everything, and within a year, the professors had blown my mind to thinking that I knew nothing. And then they spent the next 2.5, 3 years kind of helping me put my brain back together. But I had to get into a different environment in order to thrive. And I knew that. Wittenberg is a wonderful place, and I had a great time, and I really did learn a lot. And I went from a kid that wouldn't open up a book to one that would devour books. So I'm grateful for all of that. But Wittenberg in Ohio was not the place that I was going to thrive. I needed to find a place that would be a lot harder on me so I could be a lot harder on myself. And I realized that. So I can thank Wittenberg for helping me understand that, and for messing my brain up, and then putting it back together. But when you get into a big city, whether it's Chicago or New York or even Cleveland, it's like you have, the good news is you get to reinvent yourself. That's the good news. Everything that you learned here at Wittenberg, everything you did here, that's great. But nobody cares where you went to school. Nobody cares what your MBA, your GPA was. Nobody cares about that. They want to know what you're doing for them today and tomorrow and the next day. And that shift really took place for me in the first couple of years of New York. And then I was very, very lucky, and you guys have all hit it. I found a mentor, a guy named Jay Lewis, and Jay taught me how to build a business, run a business, how to think like a business person. And I'll be ever grateful for him forever.
That's great. So now,
I'll ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead. So open up questions to the audience.
So, question for Chris. So the follow focus system, right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the ground control follow spot system. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd love to hear kind of did your employer challenge you to come up with that concept, or is this something that
It's a great question. So we, PRG, the company I work for, we developed this thing called the ground control follow spot system, and it's a remote follow spot where we put a light up in the air and we can operate it from the ground and follow a performer on the stage. I was working on U2, a U2 tour. U2 360 was the tour, and we kept on having to put these follow spot operators up in the air. This is massive stadium tour. It would take 30, 40 minutes to get the guys and gals up there, and then they were stuck up there for hours. Yeah. And I was like, man, this has got to be a better way to do this. And it just had started in product development, and so I had sketched something up, and we thought, like, well, maybe it's possible, but the technology wasn't quite where it was. And then, fast forward to a couple years, I worked with another designer. I was on a Super Bowl project, and the designer's like, yeah, it's just such a difficult to put a person up here. There's got to be a better way to do it. It's like, oh, well, we have an idea. And this other designer, a guy named Bob Barnhart, he gave us some ideas, and finally I was like, you know what? We just need to do this. So I went to the CEO of the company, and I said, we're gonna start up a research development project. We had a small team. We rented a lift in Dallas, Texas, in our shop there, and we did all kinds of testing for a week to kind of figure it out. And we're like, we think this is something. And we kind of mocked it up, and we started showing it quietly to some people, and like people's minds were blown. We did a small show for Neil Patrick Harris just as a test, and like everyone's mind was blown. And then we went to a trade show, and then it was like the bottom fell out from us. We got swamped with requests. Next thing you know, I'm like on Bruce Springsteen, and like I'm actually demoing it for Bruce himself, and like we got Madonna and back to U2. I mean, every tour was just pulling this, and I mean, completely revolutionary, completely changed. It was a piece of technology that fundamentally changed our business. And because of all that, we were awarded my team and I were awarded a technical Emmy Award. And it totally unexpected, and we were shocked. We're still shocked that, that we accomplished this, and that we made such a difference. And it was truly a team effort, for sure. Mechanical engineer, software engineer. I'm on the user side, so I was explaining, like, hey, I need handles here. It's got to behave like this. But truly a revolutionary product, and that's how it all came about.
So I think that was interesting about that. And when I teach my design class, right? So I teach sort of what I call like an omnibus, a little bit of scenery, a little bit of lighting, costume. I teach it both to theater students, and I teach it as a general education class, so sometimes some nursing students and business students and things in there. And the first day of class, I always tell them, okay, so on a micro level, we're going to learn about scenery and lighting and costumes, things that are theater. But really, this is a creative problem-solving class. It just so happens that the problem you're trying to solve is, what is that character wearing? Or the problem you're trying to solve is, what is the environment? Or how do we make it look like moonlight coming through a window? So it's interesting that that you talk about. That's exactly what I talk about, which is there's a problem that we recognize. How do I draw on what I've learned in college and on the road and doing things to creatively solve this problem, and which is how innovation works, right?
Yep.
So if you, was there anything that you did here at Wittenberg, had a class or professor that sort of mentored or instilled that idea of creative problem solving in you?
Well, I mean, just the nature of the facilities. I mean, that was one of the things that what I loved about Wittenberg is that the theaters, it could be a proscenium theater, it could be a thrust theater, it could be like stadium, seats on. That alone forced me to think differently. Each show I'd have to think differently of how we were going to do this. And, the constraints of the venue, it's not a super high trim height or anything like that. So it really forced me to okay, I got to think outside the box. And educational theater in general, there's constraints on what we can spend money on and what equipment we have available to us. So for me, I always think of that scene in Apollo 13 where I got to make this fit into the hole of this using only that, and that's exactly what we were doing here in theater. Was these are the tools that we have, here's the equipment that we have, and we got to do art on a budget, art on a deadline, and art with the constraints with the equipment that we have. And that 100% has served me throughout my career, and it was one of the driving things when we did ground control for sure, was trying to think, okay, what are the constraints, thinking outside the box, how are we going to accomplish this, so.
Bam.
So hi, I'm one of Darin's current device students, and we are devising our final piece to share with the class. I wanted to know if you ever dealt with a situation where there's too many cooks in the kitchen. How do you do that?
Tom, you want to do it?
That's all you, man.
Tell the story, yeah. Just about, no, I'll go ahead.
Well, no, I was
too many
just
cooks in the kitchen about production or anything.
The reality is there's only one director. And shows that try to do co-directors or let a writer be the director are going to have a problem. It's not going to be what you want them to be. It'll be a consensus or whatever that is, but it is not a true vision by a writer and a director that is so critical for the clarity that you're going to try to get. So the more cooks you have in, the more people that have the decision about what they're going to see on the stage is problematic. That doesn't mean that there's not collaboration. So you got to understand the difference between collaboration and how that vision is going to be realized. So collaboration is great, but in the end, it's really got to be the vision of that one person, that director, with the writer working together in tandem so that what that writer wrote gets on to the stage. If you don't know, you might want to know that in theater, the writer controls everything. The writer will control what happens. The director is the visual and everything else that takes place. In movies, the director is in charge. The writers basically give you the script and then go sit in the back and we'll call you if we need you. And in TV, it's really the producers that control everything. So depending on what job you have, we'll probably tell you where you want to be, but the person in charge really needs to be the person in charge.
I'll add on to that though, navigating that's a life skill.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
You're gonna see that time and time again throughout your career. How do you navigate the politics of dealing with multiple cooks?
It's director, not dictator.
It's so true.
Do we have any more questions out there? Anybody? A couple students out there. So they're genuine. They're generous with their time. There is a. Okay, got one more. Oh, Jack.
Yeah, I'll just finish it off by asking if we were looking for maybe shadowing or even just looking for a mentorship potentially, how do we get in contact with you, and what's the best way to approach one of you?
Well, I just retired, so if you want to come and watch me, I'm actually writing a screenplay with a friend of mine right now. If you want to do that, come on over now. But no, I'm kidding. I have a really hard last name, so I'm really easy to get a hold of. It's T Wirtshafter at Gmail. But and I'll try to help. I do know a lot of people, but I have retired. So
We do. My company, we have a bunch of internships. I do a bunch of people come for tours, and my email and cell phone are on our website. But my email is cconti@prg.com. I encourage people to reach out, and hey, I'll happy to talk to you. And if you're in the area, come on by. We'll give you a tour if you want to check some out. Getting on a show site can be sometimes credentials could be a little bit sticky, but even then we can make it work for sure. I would encourage. I tell people, if you're ever in New York, let me know. We'll meet up and let's have a chat.
All right, so this has been great. So I know I speak for Darin. Whenever we have folks come back, alumni come back, they're taking time out of their days and weeks. There's some travel involved for most of the folks that come here. Their love for Wittenberg is obvious. And to piggyback off of what Jack said, folks are always willing to help. And normally, very successful folks aren't asked for help in a genuine way, but they're always willing to shine the light. I know we want to thank you, and Tim, being away in a cave somewhere, wants to say thank you. Wittenberg thanks you. Thank you for your time in the classroom today. And if for folks who didn't want to feel comfortable asking a question, they're available here in a couple seconds. You can ask them whatever question you want. Darin is able to get in touch with these folks, and this will be up on Wittenberg's website. So let's give a round of applause, because this is incredible for you two both to come back and to share your knowledge. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.